Though there are plenty of decent objections to the work of Dario Argento, no one would deny his extraordinary skill for using the medium of film to craft astounding atmospheres and production design. His films go beyond style over substance and often operate according to a logic where the style is the substance itself. His 1984 film Demons is an interesting application of this substantive style to the phenomenology of commercial media. Early in the film, an audience is seeing a movie about, you guessed it, demons. But things quickly become eerie as we soon discover that the actions on screen are being carried out in the audience as well. The two worlds align in an uncanny parallel in which the atmosphere of the film is able to transform the dimension of real life. Consequently, the audience members experience a radical transformation of both subjectivity and embodiment. I think this serves as a decent analogy for the topic of bodily affects and atmosphere. Atmosphere refers to the aura, mood, or ambiance of a particular space. They exist in a strange, indeterminate ontological status between subject and object. An atmosphere resides within a particular space and is contingent upon an external material environment to exist. But at the same time, an atmosphere requires a subject or a person to experience it. Now, I already made a more in-depth video explaining the philosophy of atmosphere, so if you'd like more information, you can check out my last video. There's a link in the description. But today, I want to talk about the ability of atmospheres to create something called affects. And so to explain this term, let's start with a definition from, and I'm not going to pronounce this correct, Gregory Sineworth and Melissa Gregg in the book The Affect Theory Reader. Gregory and Melissa write as follows. Quote, affect is the name we give to those forces, visceral forces beneath, alongside, or generally other than conscious knowing. Vital forces insisting beyond emotion that can serve to drive us toward movement, toward thought and extension, that can likewise suspend us. Indeed, affect is persistent proof of a body's never less than ongoing immersion in and among the world's rhythms. End quote. Affects are kind of like bodily ways of knowing the world around you. They are ways that things or environments pull us into certain experiences, kind of like how films pull us into the screen. That's why horror films are so successful. They know how to produce bodily affects of suspense or fear or dread. Films don't create these affects by looking at the camera and just saying something like, "Hey, viewer, you should be scared right now." That wouldn't work, would it? Instead, films create bodily affects within the viewer by constructing an atmosphere suitable for whatever kinds of affects they hope to communicate. But this doesn't apply to just film. This applies to physical spaces as well. Affect and atmosphere are closely related phenomena. Some scholars even refer to atmospheres as affective spaces, which denotes how atmospheres can get into one's body, creating a new sense of presence or dispositions toward the space that one inhabits. Of course, atmospheres do not completely determine our emotional responses to spaces. There will be a certain amount of individual affective response based upon personal history or cultural upbringing, etc. However, there is still something of a commonality to atmospheric phenomenon, at least at the more general level. Entire practices like stage design in theater, production design in film, and interior decorators are often quite successful at constructing atmospheres that encourage a limited range of affective and emotional responses. Thus, we can see that atmosphere is something that impacts us at our deepest level, and in many ways, it impacts our mode of being in the world prior to even our conscious thoughts. The affective nature of atmosphere is something that can fundamentally reorient our engagement with a particular physical space or with a particular form of commercial media. And this is also why I think that studying atmospheres and their affective qualities is an important thing to reflect upon. By understanding at least the basic ways that atmosphere works and being able to have a language to at least describe the affects that we are experiencing, this allows us to have a greater sense of agency that we can carry with us when we enter into particular spaces. Not all spaces that we inhabit are pleasant. Sometimes we enter into a particular space and for whatever reason, we just feel uncomfortable. It feels eerie, unsettling, produces within us perhaps feelings of inexplicable shame or embarrassment or insecurity. And many times we can look at ourselves and blame ourselves for these sorts of feelings. Now, I'm all for being able to take personal responsibility. However, by understanding affect and atmosphere, we can begin to unpack the ways that we experience space. This new sense of agency can be useful for both constructing atmospheres of our own and for interacting with the atmospheres that we encounter in the rest of our lives. Hopefully, by having a more robust understanding of how atmospheres work, and by knowing that atmospheres are going to produce emotional and bodily affects within people, hopefully this will cause us to consider the types of atmospheres and affects that we are creating for others. And my wish is that we would be able to use these atmospheric techniques in order to encourage others toward love, toward kindness, and towards generosity and connection with other people in meaningful ways. Thank you, and until next time, I hope that you have a blessed day.